Now, the trial has begun in Turkey of nearly 200 people arrested in recent anti-government protests. The group's accused of attending banned demonstrations in support of jailed opposition mayor Ekrem Imamoglu and for disobeying police orders to disperse. Most of the defendants are students, but a number of journalists have also been charged. They face up to 4 years behind bars.
Outside the courthouse where the first of the mass trials was being held, a small but vociferous group of protesters gathered.
These young people were exercising their constitutional rights. Article 34 of the Constitution gives them the right to assemble and to protest without needing permission, without violence or resistance.
The so-called Generation Z, the ones they said couldn't even lift a glass, are in revolt because things aren't running properly. The kids are living in fear for their future.
Since the judiciary has become politicized, we know a fair trial won't be possible unless we're here. So we're here to raise our voices and stand in solidarity with them.
More than 180 people, mostly students but also some journalists, face charges of taking part in banned demonstrations and ignoring police warnings to disperse. The charges stem from mass protests that erupted across Turkey following last month's arrest of Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem Imamoglu, on corruption charges. He was widely seen as the biggest threat to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and was poised to be nominated as the opposition candidate at the next election before his arrest. Imamoglu's imprisonment is widely viewed as politically motivated, though the government insists the Turkish judiciary operates independently. Almost 2,000 people were detained at the mass protests.
We expect an acquittal in this case. Yet an acquittal here won't end the matter, because this trial is less a legal proceeding and more a message to journalists. Don't cover protests, don't report news critical of us, or we'll detain and deport you.
The Erdogan government has long faced accusations of increasing authoritarianism. The rushed nature and large scale of these trials is doing nothing to dispel those charges.
Let's go to our correspondent, Dorian Jones in Istanbul. Welcome, Dorian. What happened today in court?
Well, it's been quite an eventful day. Outside Istanbul's main courthouse, hundreds of people, possibly thousands, turned up in support of the defendants. It was quite celebratory, people dancing and cheering and giving the message that they're not going to be intimidated by these cases. But in the courtroom, there was pretty much chaotic scenes. These cases of over 180 people. It was split into two separate hearings. One courtroom wasn't considered big enough, so that case was then split into another two. 45 so people, their cases were adjourned, while the other 45, that's going to be held in another court. In the other courtroom, that case was adjourned until October. So as is the way with these cases, they are pretty slow moving. A lot of controversy. Defence lawyers called for immediate acquittal. That was rejected by the judges. There was a protest and the court was cleared. So it's just the beginning of what is said to be quite a long, drawn-out process.
And what sort of sentences are they facing? And how is the trial itself being regarded?
Well, they are facing from a number of months up to 3 years. The prosecutors are pushing for the maximum sentences in many of these cases, even though there has been widespread criticism over the handling of these cases. Human Rights Watch, the US-based human rights organization who has been following the case, issued a statement ahead of it. They've examined the cases very closely. They say that these cases are arbitrary. The sheer number of defendants being held in one case is also undermines the principle of justice. And they just say there isn't the evidence. They say there's been no individual evidence against the defendants. It seems to be a collective punishment. On the cases of some of the defendants carrying weapons, they say there is no evidence other than one photo where one person is possibly carrying a rock. So there's a lot of condemnation over the way these cases are being carried out, and a feeling that they are pretty much politically motivated to prevent and undermine the support for this protests over the jailed Istanbul mayor Ekrem Imamoglu.
And some of the defendants are journalists who were covering the protests. What are they being charged with?
Well, initially they were charged with participating in the protests. Now, there's been a lot of outrage over this, given the fact that these journalists are some of the most prominent reporters in the country, including very well-known, internationally known photojournalists. They said that they were there to just cover these protests. Now, in the courtroom today, it does appear that the judges have separated their cases away from the protesters, although they have refusing the defence lawyers' calls for them to be immediately acquitted. Those cases are still going on, but are now being considered separate to the protesters.
And the trial and the arrest, are they having any noticeable effect on turnout for demonstrations?
Well, I think it certainly led to a change in tactics by the opposition. They've been holding these large protests in the centre of Istanbul, outside Istanbul City Town Hall. But the fact that there were growing numbers of arrests and also the growing violence, which the organisers claim was being used by the police against the defendants, has seen a change in the tactics. Those protests were abandoned and now are being transferred to protests that have been held across the country on a weekly basis. So there was a change in tactics, but those protests are still going on.
Thanks for that, Dorian. Dorian Jones in Istanbul.